Our responsibility is to point out that in this way he would be actually not just harming Canadians who work so well with the United States. Donald Trump, when he makes statements like that, he plans on carrying them out. There's no question about it.
Under the golden Floridian sun, a sleek Canadian government jet landed at Mar-a-Lago with an air of urgency that betrayed the mission's true nature. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stepped onto the tarmac, his usual easy demeanor replaced by a grim determination. This wasn't just a diplomatic visit, it was a race against time to shield Canada's economy from a storm brewing just across the border. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Trump's looming threat of a 25% tariff on Canadian goods had sent shockwaves through Ottawa. With over three-quarters of Canada's exports destined for the United States, such a move would be catastrophic, sparking job losses and economic turbulence on a scale unseen in decades. The weight of these grim realities bore down on Trudeau as he and his delegation, including Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, approached the opulent gates of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Inside, the ornate chandeliers cast shimmering reflections over a dining room that felt more like a stage for power plays than a setting for diplomacy. Seated at the table was Donald Trump, flanked by his inner circle. Figures like Howard Lutnick, Mike Waltz, and Doug Burgum, poised to assume key roles in a potential second administration. Their presence turned an already fraught situation into a minefield of political implications. As servers moved gracefully around, presenting exquisitely plated dishes, the real feast was in the negotiation. Trudeau began to lay out his case. Canada and the U.S. weren't just neighbors, they were economic partners bound by decades of mutual reliance. The energy and resources Canada supplied were lifelines for American industries, Trudeau argued, critical now more than ever in an era of volatile global supply chains and surging demand for essential minerals. Trump, however, was unmoved at first, leaning back in his chair with that signature blend of skepticism and theatricality. "It's great," he said with a wave of his hand, "but America needs to win big. And right now, we're not winning enough." Outside the gilded walls of Mar-a-Lago, the situation back in Canada was spiraling. In Ottawa, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland faced reporters, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the tension filling the room. The media, desperate for answers about the government's response to Trump's tariff threats, bombarded her with pointed questions. Her responses, however, offered little clarity, and then came the comment that would haunt her for weeks, a tone-deaf reference to the affordability of rotisserie chicken. Social media exploded in ridicule. Critics accused the Liberals of being out of touch, their attempts to stabilize an economy on the brink overshadowed by what seemed like political floundering. Opposition leaders pounced, lambasting Freeland's performance as evidence of a government unprepared to face the mounting crisis. Back at Mar-a-Lago, Trudeau pressed on. His team, meticulously prepared, presented measures to bolster border security and address trade concerns. LeBlanc proposed deploying advanced technology and additional personnel to streamline cross-border commerce, signaling Canada's willingness to meet Trump halfway. But the question lingered. Would it be enough to dissuade Trump from imposing his punitive tariffs? The tension in the room was palpable as Trudeau sought to find common ground. He highlighted the disastrous impact such tariffs would have not just on Canada, but on American consumers and businesses. Higher prices for goods, disruptions to supply chains, and strained economic relations were all on the table. When Canada thrives, Trudeau asserted, America benefits too. As the night wore on, the mood began to shift. Trump's entourage whispered among themselves, the weight of Trudeau's arguments beginning to register. Still, Trump remained non-committal, his decision hanging in the air like an unspoken verdict. The stakes extended beyond the gilded halls of Mar-a-Lago. Across Canada, industries braced for the fallout of Trump's potential tariffs. Workers feared layoffs, and businesses scrambled to assess the damage such a policy could inflict. It wasn't just trade on the line, it was the livelihoods of millions of Canadians. In the end, the meeting concluded without a definitive resolution. Trudeau departed Mar-a-Lago under the cover of night, his team silent but not defeated. Back in Ottawa, the fallout from Freeland's press conference continued to dominate headlines. Critics accused the government of mishandling the crisis, while analysts warned of the long-term consequences if Trump's threats materialized. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear: the showdown at Mar-a-Lago was a turning point. The delicate balance of U.S.-Canada relations had been tested, and the ripples of this high-stakes dinner would be felt for years to come. For Trudeau, the fight was far from over. The next moves in this tense diplomatic dance would determine the future of Canada's economy and its place in a rapidly changing global landscape. As the jet carried Trudeau and his delegation back to Canada, silence filled the cabin. Each member of the team was lost in their thoughts, replaying every word, every gesture, and every reaction from the Mar-a-Lago dinner. The Prime Minister, staring out into the dark expanse of the Atlantic, knew the battle was far from over. Trump hadn't outright rejected Canada's pleas, but neither had he committed to sparing Canadian industries from the crushing weight of his proposed tariffs. It was a precarious limbo, and Trudeau would have to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Meanwhile, back in Ottawa, the political temperature continued to rise. Freeland, now at the center of a media firestorm, was scrambling to regain control of the narrative. Her comments about rotisserie chicken, meant as a light-hearted attempt to connect with everyday Canadians, had instead become a lightning rod for criticism. Opposition leaders seized the opportunity, calling her remarks emblematic of a government out of touch with the struggles of working-class Canadians. The backlash wasn't just a matter of optics. Public confidence in the government's ability to manage the looming crisis was waning. Business leaders voiced growing concerns over the potential fallout of Trump's tariffs, warning that entire sectors could be decimated if no resolution was reached. Farmers, manufacturers, and energy producers, the backbone of Canada's export economy, were all watching anxiously, their futures hanging in the balance. Trudeau's office worked tirelessly to coordinate a multi-pronged response. Behind closed doors, the Prime Minister held emergency meetings with his cabinet, economic advisers, and trade experts. The team began crafting contingency plans to mitigate the potential damage, from diversifying export markets to exploring domestic economic stimulus packages. Yet, these measures could only cushion the blow. The real solution lay in securing a favorable outcome with the United States. As tensions mounted, whispers of dissent began to emerge within Trudeau's own party. Some MPs, particularly those from regions most vulnerable to the tariffs, expressed frustration at what they perceived as a reactive rather than proactive approach. The Prime Minister's strategy, they argued, relied too heavily on Trump's goodwill, a commodity in short supply. Trudeau, however, remained steadfast, insisting that diplomacy was the only viable path forward. Days after the Mar-a-Lago meeting, a new twist sent shockwaves through the political landscape. A leaked memo from Trump's inner circle suggested that the former president saw the tariffs not just as an economic measure, but as a political strategy. The memo described the tariffs as a means to galvanize his base, framing Canada as an economic rival exploiting America's generosity. The revelation only deepened the urgency of Trudeau's mission. This wasn't just about trade. It was about navigating a geopolitical chess game where Canada's economy was a pawn in a larger battle. The leaks also triggered a shift in public sentiment. While many Canadians had been critical of the government's handling of the situation, the memo reframed the narrative. Trump's actions were increasingly seen as a direct attack on Canada, uniting citizens across political lines in defense of their country's interests. Protests erupted in major cities, with demonstrators waving Canadian flags and calling for unity in the face of foreign aggression. The message was clear: Canada wouldn't back down. As the political and economic drama unfolded, Trudeau received an unexpected lifeline. Several influential U.S. governors, whose states relied heavily on trade with Canada, began voicing their concerns about the tariffs. Led by Michigan's governor, they urged the White House to reconsider, warning that the tariffs would harm American workers just as much as Canadian ones. Their intervention gave Trudeau's team a crucial opening, one they seized with vigor. The Canadian government launched a targeted diplomatic campaign, reaching out to U.S. lawmakers, business leaders, and media outlets. Ambassadors and trade representatives flooded Washington, emphasizing the mutual benefits of the Canada-US economic partnership. Trudeau himself took to the airwaves, granting interviews to major American networks where he highlighted the interconnectedness of the two nations' economies. Back in Canada, Freeland worked to repair her image and refocus public attention on the stakes at hand. She delivered a series of impassioned speeches, acknowledging her missteps while doubling down on the government's commitment to protecting Canadian jobs and industries. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Public criticism gave way to cautious optimism as Canadians rallied behind their government's efforts. The breakthrough, when it finally came, was a testament to the power of persistence. After weeks of back-and-forth negotiations, Trump announced a temporary suspension of the tariff proposal. While the threat hadn't been fully eliminated, it gave both sides room to negotiate a longer-term solution. For Trudeau, it was a hard-won victory, albeit a fragile one. The crisis, however, left an indelible mark on Canada's political and economic landscape. It exposed vulnerabilities in the nation's reliance on the U.S. market, sparking renewed debates about economic diversification and national self-sufficiency. It also underscored the unpredictability of navigating a global economy shaped by volatile leaders and shifting alliances. For Trudeau, the Mar-a-Lago dinner became a defining moment of his leadership, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, diplomacy, determination, and a bit of grit could still make a difference. Yet, as he returned to the grind of governing, he knew the battle for Canada's economic future was far from over. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for now, at least, the nation had bought itself a fighting chance.